if you take all the expense base of every company in the world and say that's coming to the task to help in their purchase power, that so overwhelms any governmental funding. I mean, just like.
Welcome to Glasgow, Scotland. I'm here at the COP26 and I'm speaking with Bank of America's CEO and Chairman, Brian Moynihan. Good to see you, Brian. You've been here for a few days. Have you been sampling the Scottish goodies? I don't know what they are. Scotch eggs?
There's lots of good stuff. And lots of good stuff. I had a lot of Scottish dinners and it's been good. But, I think the interesting thing here is just watching all of the world come to the task. The private sector, the public sector, the private finance sector, the private operating sector, the governments. And so, the energy leading up to it was high, and I think coming out of it's going to be high, and now we just got to go do the work.
Well, you've been part of the GFANZ coalition, as it were, the coalition of the willing and the arm twisting that's been involved in that with Mark Carney. You've got $130 trillion of assets now signed up to that. What is the plan? Because that's not $130 trillion of assets that go to this, it's just possibly deployable. How do you actually make that money work to try to get particularly poor countries to sort of leapfrog the hydrocarbons era?
Yeah, so I think let's talk about, we operate a big company called Bank of America, and they do a great job in this area. And so we have $1 trillion commitment to finance. We have $1.5 trillion for SDGs generally. We have $1 trillion of that is environmental, and we made that commitment, which became part of the commitments the U.S. Financial Services made at President Biden Summit. It's so as part of the GFANZ as the architect of that. So that's a bunch of work with our clients. Our clients are going to make this transition. We're going to finance it. We financed $80 billion last year, and so the idea is that will keep scaling up. And my guess is we'll do this faster because it's real business. So it's $80 billion went out the door last year to our clients to help them make the transition. Some pure renewable energy companies and some core operating companies that need to borrow money to recapitalize, reset the way they do things.
Well, it's really interesting because, of course, you have companies that are in the fossil fuel business. You're one of the biggest banks in the world. How do you answer criticism? Say, you guys should just. A lot of people say you should just stop funding these companies. And of course, I think you use the word transition. And the idea is really how do you get them to transition, but how do you make that delicate balance?
Well, this is where the integrated system of all the different parts come together. So it has to. The word we use that you hear people use is a just transition, and people can hear what the just is. Some people think it's it's all these things. It's just rich countries to poor countries, urban to rural. It's just rich to poor people in a country. It's just to the fossil fuel companies. They employ people. They have to do it. So we have to help them make the transition. Now, what we're saying though is you have to start. You have to do something, and you can see the market being made in those fossil fuel companies as we speak, where ones have made commitments and shareholders have endorsed them. With high, that's good things, and other ones are coming along, and you'll see that happen. But the idea is they'll make a commitment, and then society and we and all of us have to make sure they go along the lines of that commitment. And people start to total those commitments up and make a debate, are we 1.7 or 1.9 or 2.2, and all that will happen. But the key is to get them to make that commitment, because once they do that, that starts a chain of events. And it's hard for the companies in extraction or cement or these things. And that's why you hear a lot of us talking about, whether it's Bill Gates and the Breakthrough Catalyst, which we're a part of, or whether it's in the Sustainable Markets Initiative, Prince Charles, that I work with, which is a coalition willing. We have the oil and gas companies in there, along with the finance companies, along with the private equity companies, along with the renewable companies, saying, how do we work together to make this work? Because those companies in cement or that have to make this transition. If we don't get them to transition, that's where all the emissions.
It's actually kind of interesting. You say, people focus a lot on the fossil fuels business, extracting, resources, but it is these hard to abate ones, whether it's cement or concrete or steel.
Right.
What do you have to, as a financier to these businesses? What's the right way? What's the approach? Do you say, look, we want to see your plan. We want you to benchmark it along these ways, and what happens if they don't? I guess that's the kind of.
Well, think about what if you were a startup news organization and you came to the bank and said, "I want to borrow some money." You'd have to.
You guys would never lend to us.
Back in the early days, but you'd have to have you'd have to have a business plan. It's the same thing. I have to have a plan because their demand's going to shift on them, their pricing's going to shift on them, the value of their assets. They know that. You're talking to people who actually really know this stuff cold, right? You're talking. We're all talking about reserves and what they're worth and all that stuff. These guys know it. So they've got to make the transition. So it is. Put your plan on the table, and then we have to then hold you to it. But your shareholders, your board, you're going to probably hold yourself to it harder than we are. But in the financing over time, we'll have to make sure they're doing it because there is real market-based revenue risk involved here.
Yeah.
And so everybody says, well, put it in your market portfolio today. You say, well, it's not probably in the next 9 quarters in the stress test, but it is over time. So as they're making that move, their ability to get financing, their ability to have shareholder support, all the things they need to get the capital to do it. And that's the transition. And so, but if people get caught in a binary, and it's not a binary, whether Mark Carney says or what I say it or anybody else, it's not binary. By the way, even if we weren't saying it, it's impossibly binary, or else we wouldn't be able to run the world. So part of the justice keep these economies moving, because remember, at the end of the day, is we all say, well, you got to get the developing countries to move to the next thing, and it's absolutely right. But they got to have the power to expand.
Now, when you look at it's sort of a country by country deal, isn't it? Though, it's sort of, you see the deal that they did with South Africa. Now you want to sort of bring Vietnam, and it seems like the idea is to do these deals and make them almost not templates, but platforms that can be then blueprinted, and then you ultimately bring them to Prime Minister Modi or Xi Jinping and say, can you bring it something under 2070 to net zero?
That's all in the political process.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, in the private sector, we do a tremendous amount of financing for renewables in India already, and so do our colleague companies.
Sure.
So it's just happening on the private market side, because the commitments that companies are making to clean energy in their usage, whether it's the big data farm companies, the big computer farm companies, the big steel producers, whatever.
Sure.
As they make it, they need that supply of power, just like we did in North Carolina. We had to get our footprint down, and so we basically cut a deal. We took an offtake contract to Duke Power, and they're going to build a big solar plant, of which we'll take a big chunk of. But it just came to the thing, we had to sit there and say, here, we'll pay for that, because for us, $100 million across $55 billion expense to pay to neutralize that piece for our direct operations, that's worth it. But we had to get them we don't build plants, we had to get them to build a plant. And so our contract provides a base they can take out. That's going to go on in the private sector all over the world. In the private sector, if you take all the expense base of every company in the world and say that's coming to the task to help in their purchase power, that so overwhelms any governmental funding. I mean, just like, and then you take our balance sheets in the financial system. I'm telling you, we're doing $100 billion a year. Think about that in the context of what governments have to spend. By the way, look at all the other commitments that Mark has pulled together.
No, it's amazing. Last question. So this is like the first big conference that many of us have been to. I don't know if you've been doing lots of these kinds of things. Do you think there's like this, you see a sense of people really excited to get back? I mean, there certainly means we have longer queues. We all have to take, do our tests in the morning and everything. What's your sense of like the conference culture and business?
I think, absolutely. You've seen it. We did a thing with the Sustainable Markets CEOs a couple weeks ago, and it was sort of the first time we had them together. So we built this thing all virtually. So imagine, video conferences with, CEOs that were asked to come and form a task force. And so they were together. The speed at which the cross stuff took place, meaning, oh, geez, I didn't know you were doing that. We can do that between industry groups, because we built them by industry. That can only go on. And so, last night we had a dinner with the GFAN CEOs, and the amount of energy in the room and stuff. So I think people forget that kind of energy level can come to these things. Now the reality is we still have to win a war on this virus. Mm-hmm. The number one priority for the world for the next several months, and hopefully it's months, not several years, and it shouldn't be, is to continue to get the vaccines done and continue. Marvelous science executed at a pace you can't believe. We just got to get it out, because the more we make that certain, you can get back to normal. And our country in the United States is at one level, Europe's another level, other countries are coming on, but we just have to get this done, because that war on the virus is a risk to recession, the risk to central bank mistakes, everything that's comes with the variability in that war. And good news is we're making it, knock on wood, nothing comes up to stop it.
All right, well, thanks, Brian. Good luck with the rest of the conference.
Thank you.